After giving it some more time and actually beating all of the available levels with all of the available characters, Halls of Torment has definitely grown on me, and since there have been a few requests for another video on it since a certain reaction tuber talked about it,
I think this is a solid 9, if not a 10 out of 10 game.
I felt it might be fun to take a little bit of a deeper dive into the game, as well as ways I think this game and the bullet heaven genre in general could improve itself to go from a trend to a staple category. The gameplay itself is pretty much what you'd expect from this type of game. Wander around, slaughtering waves of enemies in various environments. At this state in early access, it's 3 environments: a ruined city or temple zone, a hellscape, and a bridge, with a 4th ice cave level coming soon. That will include choke point options and a bit more strategy. Though generally speaking, the variety will be limited since this type of title does rely on being able to not only spawn all those enemies, but have attacks that can deal with them effectively. The main difference is going to be the skin on that, and the variety in characters and meta progression, which this game actually does exceptionally well in all of those categories, and they're even working on more as of the writing of this review. As it stands, it strikes a nice balance of layers and accessibility as well, since you'll almost never have a run where you don't make at least some progress towards more unlocks. This is because the game includes multiple types of progression and interlocks them in interesting ways. You have quests that give you bonus gold, so early on you'll get plenty just going in and aiming for these, even if you can't beat the stage boss. Then, as you spend that gold on basic upgrades, you'll start getting more gold just by doing the levels and unlock from a decent selection of other progression types. This ranges from unlockable skill boosts that you gain access to by playing with bonus damage, pickup range, movement, regeneration, attack speed, etc., to more complex goals such as equipment that you send up through an NPC you find in the game, where you can mix and match playstyle enhancing and modifying items, or just basic stat boosting items depending on your preference and progress. This equipment is permanent in that once you've unlocked it, you can use it as much as you want, though you do only get to send up 1 item per run, despite being able to equip multiple items, so it is good to make decisions on what to send up based on how you like to play. Though it is not overwhelming and you will unlock plenty since each run does have a fixed length, with 30 minutes until the boss spawn and then however long it takes you to kill or die to said boss. Now, there are some pieces of equipment that can only be gotten through certain events as well, so do keep that in mind, and you will sometimes need to take in equipment specifically for hunting certain items to unlock, such as tracking potion ingredients, since they're needed for the potion dealer that unlocks your level up tools. As far as what he offers, the current selection is pretty solid, with the ability to reroll level up options, the ability to banish a level up option, and the ability to lock in an option for a future level up, all of which are fairly standard, but it also includes a more uncommon option, which is a doubler. Basically a potion that lets you double the level up effect, which can be super handy for getting some of the harder achievements. I have found that the game does get a little bit easy after a certain amount of progression, especially for certain classes, though admittedly I have almost maxed out all of the progression. The upcoming patch will be including difficulty tiers for each of the levels, so that should be a nice change to keep the difficulty scaling as you get more unlocked, though it could also open up a bit more of the gaps between the characters' strengths and weaknesses, since they are very much not created equal, and the main reason to play some of the weaker ones is only to unlock their blessings, items, and skills for other classes to use. Probably the strongest class, at least for me, would be the Archer. This is mainly because of her range, natural piercing, and her being set up for crit boosts out of the gate, even so far as several of her quest progressions being focused around getting a specific number of critical hits in a run. She also is how you unlock increased attack speed and such, so pretty important there. She's kind of extremely easy to unlock because she's your first one usually, so it could be familiarity for me that makes her easier since she will be pretty much always your first unlock as well unless you play very weird. Now, the starter class, the Swordsman, may seem kind of clumsy at first, but he's actually my second favorite class after a number of hours I put into it. This is mostly because while he lacks the range starting out, his attack is a wedge-shape attack that can be stacked up to do some solid damage at a pretty good speed, even so far as later on getting the ability to hit massive swaths of the screen with range and area of effect boosts. Now, as we move away from those two, the characters tend to get a bit more eclectic, with very specific playstyles and design. The Exterminator, which is usually your third character, is basically a walking fire bat, focused on making enemies burn, unlocking fire skills and items, and was one of my favorite classes early on, but sort of fell off after I got enough unlocks, since while he's fun, I never really feel quite as punchy with him unless I'm able to get my burn effects and triggers going exceptionally strong. The Sorceress, which you'll unlock fairly late, is the lightning equivalent of him, and a good one to level up since the lightning skills are some of the most familiar feeling abilities in the game, so her boosts are welcome, though in terms of her gameplay she can be a bit fiddly with her chain lightning attack being less intuitive to use than you would hope, and in practice she ends up feeling like a less competent version of the archer for me, unless I'm going hyper focused on lightning specifically in both skills and boosts. The last three that you'll unlock at different stages are the Shield Maiden, the Warlock, and the Cleric. They take some getting used to because they play fairly different from the rest. The Shield Maiden, for example, has two native attacks, a Shield Bash and a Hammer Strike, that get different benefits and such, and she has a weird dead zone where if an enemy is right on top of her, she has trouble damaging them unless you have a specific skill, which makes one of her achievements a total pain since it involves standing still for an extended period of time at the start of the map, which means standing still before you have any skills, so I'd wait until later to do that one when you have equipment to cover the gaps. The Warlock, on the other hand, is weird in a different way since he has a homing attack that will remind you of the Elemental in Diablo 1, basically charging out and striking whatever's near. If you're running a manual fire without auto-aim playstyle, it could be interesting, but I generally prefer the game with auto-fire and manual aiming. He's also got weird quirks where he wants to lower maximum life for higher damage, and most of his unlocks are lackluster at best so far. I think as the game progresses he could be fun with more summoning boosts, but for now he's a summoner with very limited minion options. The last one, and probably the strangest of the bunch for me to play, and probably the most difficult for me to get used to because the rhythm, is the Cleric. He's got fast regen, and that's his shtick, which is fine and good if you're clumsy, but he attacks in bursts rather than a steady attack like other classes, which feels really weird, so I pretty much only take him out for unlocks, and even then rarely. Though his unlock skill, Radiant Aura, is definitely one of the more interesting abilities, since it does a large amount of damage when it ticks, but it's evenly split by all enemies in range, which can be a pretty potent tool against singled out enemies. All of them are fun in their own respects, except maybe the Cleric for me because of the rhythm thing, but I look forward to seeing what else they end up doing with future characters, since they've shown an ability and desire to at least make them unique, even if they aren't all created equal. And honestly, I'm fine with them not being created equal, since it lets you control your own difficulty in a more nuanced manner and enjoy your own playstyle. I also would not be surprised if they add at least 3 or 4 more characters in the future, since there's still elemental damage types to explore, like the upcoming cold update, as well as elements you don't quite have access to outside of items, like poison and retaliation damage effects. Though the timeline on these releases is still up in the air, but it does seem like they are keeping a steady pace while avoiding rushing things out half-baked. One nice thing though is that in spite of the classes being unique in their core attacks, all the special attacks, boons, and even damage conversion items are available to every class, so once you decide on one you like, you can experience all the side weapons for it in one form or another, with the only major differences being based on the character-specific bonuses that can help it in other ways. Now, you may have noticed there's been one thing glaringly absent from this so far that I usually cover, and it's something that is absent from pretty much every Bullet Heaven. And that is story. Sure, you get little bits when rescuing the Well Keeper or Cupbearer, but beyond that, it's pretty bare. Even certain in-level discoveries such as the Bloody Trails only give so much, and it admittedly would be difficult to add to this game specifically. One thing I would love to see though would be an attempt at an actual proper story-driven Bullet Heaven. This game's aesthetic would even lend itself to it quite well, though how they would implement it at this point, I'm not quite sure if it's even viable to ask. But I would love to see a title like this step up and give me a reason I'm slaughtering these swarms of enemies, demons, bugs, etc., or whatever a given game in the genre gives us. It would take the game from a cookie clicker style long-term fad for me, which is enjoyable, mindless, and relaxing, into something I could invest in mentally and give more than the "this is just fun" checkmark, and maybe even a Game of the Year checkmark. I think with the right wrapping, probably a darker RPG theme or a sci-fi or dark fantasy setting where you can justify all the deaths, it could be a solid long-term banger thanks to the approachable gameplay loop from these titles, especially with the layered meta progression of games like Halls of Torment. So do you think the genre has potential that is being left on the table, or do you think that it would be impossible to take this formula to a deeper level without ruining its appeal? Discuss it down below, and as always, if you found this informative or you want to see more content like this, impale that like button since it really does help the channel out. And if you want to see these without ads, check out the Patreon down below.